Hello everybody, it's Mr. G coming at you once again with another Misconceptions in History, and today, bringing you a little special edition. I know I've been talking about tanks. I'm going to take a break from that because my son's been begging me to do this one, and with me having over 500 followers now, I figured now was the time. And what we're going to discuss today is arguably one of the most famous and most produced firearms in modern history. We're going to be talking about the AK weapons platform. Yes, that includes the AK-47, but I'm also going to touch briefly on some of the other AKs. I just don't have enough time to hit everything that was ever built from the AK. I do want to invite everybody to remember that this is just a brief history of the development of the weapon itself, its origins, things like that. I'm not here to give my personal opinions on the weapon or anything like that. I'm just providing the facts of the weapons platform. There are only a few weapons, I believe, out there that can be truly identified and are extremely distinct, and their portrayal in media is really out there. We've seen in tons of movies like Here, Seen, and Heartbreak Ridge, where Gunny Highway is trying to get the Marines under his command to be familiar with the unique sound of the AK-47's weapons platform. But this weapon is in tons of movies. The list is ridiculously long, and it's seen in every variation from its origins of the 47 to the more modern combinations of it. But this, of course, begs the question, where did this weapons platform that over 100 million in this weapons family had been made come from? And like so many things before it was born out of necessity of war. During the course of World War II, the Soviet Union became aware that the German military had deployed a new weapon, the Sturmgewehr 44 rifle, also known as the STG-44. This was a select fire rifle that fired an intermediate cartridge, the 7.92 by 33 millimeter curves. And this was unique because it provided the firepower. By that I mean the ability to throw as many rounds as possible as you could from a submachine gun, but with the accuracy and range of a rifle. And this would become the first production assault rifle. Now this interested the Russians because they were still fielding the PPSH-41 submachine gun and the outdated Mosin Nagant, which wasn't a horrible rifle, it was just not up to par with the rest of the world at the time. At the same time, the Soviet Union developed a new cartridge, the 7.62 by 39 millimeter, which would become the standard production cartridge for the Soviet Union. This would become the standard cartridge for their new SKS carbine rifles, which were semi-automatic rifles designed to replace the Mosin Nagant, and the RPD light machine gun designed to be a easily portable machine gun for suppressing fire. But this round would really change in the hands of Mikhail Kalashnikov. Now, Kalashnikov actually began his career in weapons after he was recovering from a wound from the Battle of Bryansk. And his earliest designs were actually submachine guns and light machine guns, but he never really had anything that came to fruition until he decided to combine some of the best features of the American M1 Garand and the German STG-44. And his initial prototypes would actually be known as the AK-1 and the AK-2, later known as the AK-46, which was his early prototype weapon system. Now, this weapon actually had more in common with the German STG-44 than it did with the future AK platforms. And his assistant is actually the one that decided to tell him, hey, we're going to submit this weapon to the government to be used, but I think it can have some improvements. And he actually listened to his assistant, he didn't have to, and decided to come up with a better prototype. This new prototype was actually finished by November of 1947, and he gave it the name AK-47. In case you didn't know, that's where the name actually comes from. And this was actually a much simpler design than his AK-46. It was easier to produce, and the Army began testing it in 1948. The rifle essentially passed with all the flying covers. It proved to be extremely reliable under a wide range of conditions, was very convenient and easy to use, easy to manufacture, and in 1949, the Soviet Army adopted it as the 7.62 millimeter Kalashnikov rifle, also known as the AK. And before somebody tries to comment that AK and Kalashnikov rifle don't go together, it actually is Automat Kalashnikov, which is AK. And as good as the weapon was, within 10 years, the Soviet Union went ahead and upgraded the weapon. They created what was called the AKM, and the M stands for modernized. And this was an upgraded version of the AK-47. It used a newer stamped sheet metal receiver, had a new type of muzzle brake at the end to compensate for rise from the recoil because 7.62 can kind of hit kind of hard. And even though they called the AKM the modernized version of the AK, by 1974 they had switched to the AK-74, which utilized a 5.45 by 39 millimeter round. And even though the 7.62 is the workhorse of the Soviet Army, they switched to this 5.45 because it actually had better range, better accuracy, and better reliability, which meant that it was a more accurate and better for precision work. Continuing this trend of firing unusual cartridges, the AK-101 and 102 were actually a series of AK rifles that fired 5.56 millimeter NATO, which was a standard NATO round at the time in the 90s. And this was actually designed for armies that were familiar with the AK platforms, but were using 5.56, and this allowed them to combine both. In 2001, using the AK-100 series platform, like the 101 and 102, they returned to the 7.62 millimeter rounds on the AK platform. The AK-105 was actually a modernized AK-74 carbine that fired the 5.45 by 39 millimeter ammo. Designed in 2011, the first 5th generation AK platform, the AK-12 and AK-15, were released. Now, what's interesting about this rifle is it actually came in 4 calibers: 5.45, 7.62, 5.56 NATO, and 7.62 NATO, meaning this weapon was easy to market around the world. The AK-200 series is essentially an upgrade of the 100 series, but not as advanced as the AK-12 and AK-15. And this is actually another one of those marketing ones. The rifle was actually built more for export and sales than it was for indigenous use. And the final mainline update for the AK platform is the AK-19. This fires a 5.56 millimeter NATO, standard NATO round, and was actually introduced in 2020, and as of 2022 it's supposed to be in production. And there you have a very quick origins of the AK weapons platform and its direct success line. I know there's been a lot of other versions of the AK platform. They've been converted into machine guns and grenade launchers, and there's even shotguns based off of this, and I don't have time for all that, and I do apologize. But I hope you enjoyed this quick little version, and I look forward to talking to y'all the next time, where we will finish out main tanks with Soviet tanks and then move on to the oddball tanks. Thanks for joining me.